Good afternoon. Thank you to everyone for joining us today for our first emerging market side fire chat on the cannabis industry. My name is Sharon R. Pinder. I'm president and CEO of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council and the operator of the Virginia MBDA Business Center and the Capital Region Capital Readiness Program. CRMSDC, as you know, is one of 23 regional affiliate councils of the National Minority Supply Development Council, headquartered in Maryland. For 53 years, our mission continues to endure and has remained to certify, develop, connect, and advocate for minority businesses across this country, but specifically in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. Our organization partners with over 70 corporate members who support our mission and have certified over 700 MBEs who generate $7 billion in annual revenues and employ over 60,000 individuals, who contributes to the economic impact across the capital region. To learn more about what we do every day and how we can support you, please visit our website 24/7, www.crmsdc.org. And to that end, in an effort to expand opportunities for minority businesses, I'm delighted to be here today as we reignite our podcast series, Hot Chat Podcast, and welcome our very first special guest of the year. And that's Ms. Audrey Johnson, to offer you some insight around how Maryland is supporting the growth of this emerging market called cannabis. In fact, legal marijuana is growing by leaps and bounds. Recreational cannabis is legal in 24 states and the District of Columbia, nearly doubling that number for medicinal use. And overall market is expected to reach 66.3 billion. That's kind of exact, right? By the end of this year, 2025. And so we found this to be an exciting topic to merge or to launch our emerging market and technology series. So to join me in this discussion, let me introduce my friend and colleague, Audrey Johnson. Hello, Audrey.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you.
I am so honored to share this space and time with you. But I want to tell people a little bit about you, and people are chomping at the bit to get into this conversation. So I'm just love, and you look wonderful that we're having this very important conversation today. You were appointed by Governor Westmore to serve as the inaugural executive director of the newly created Office of Social Equity. You bring more than a decade of experience leading programs and strategies that promote economic development, equity, and inclusion. Now, prior to that, I want folks to understand this is not your first rodeo in terms of being the first at something or to making something work. I mean, you as an executive, you're just, second to none, just awesome. But prior to this, joining the Moore administration, you drove key initiatives for Johns Hopkins University Health System. You held senior roles, and this is where we met, at Kaiser Permanente, and you are an active civic leader, serving as president of the Baltimore chapter of the National Association of Health Executive, amongst various other organizations. You're not only accomplished, you're a friend and an ally, but more importantly, people need to understand that you are committed for advancing opportunities for the underserved. So, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone, please help me virtually welcome Audrey. How you doing today?
I am well. Thank you for having me. I am so excited. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you today. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation about the future of cannabis industry and most
Mm-hmm.
importantly, the role equity in shaping it. Maryland is leading the way with bold and first of its kind policies. And our work at the Office of Social Equity is ensuring that this industry creates real opportunities for those who have been historically been excluded. So I look forward to sharing more about our efforts and the lessons that we're also learning along the way.
Okay. And I love that as the opening, but let's just get down to some things, right? People may not know, when I first met you, I believe you had just moved from California. I believe that was the case, right? And what becomes such an interesting point of the conversation, that at that point in time, or I should say it this way, when you were in California is when California became one of the, I guess, first states perhaps to legalize marijuana, to legalize cannabis. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yes.
And so when you voted for legalization, I shouldn't tell people how you voted, but when you voted for legalization, you had no idea that maybe a short time later, and several years later, that you would be making history by being the first inaugural executive director in this particular office. And so we talked about a little bit of that, in terms of being in California, voting for legalization. But, July 2023 was legalization. What happened by September of 2024, just a year and a couple of months later in the state of Maryland?
Wow. So in Maryland, the legalization of adult use cannabis was July of 2023. And so it was our opportunity to really provide access, really open up this market. And really, the purpose of our office and our mission is really to diversify this market. So we saw a huge immediately increase in sales of cannabis from the first month of legalization. And in that following year, we crossed the $1 billion mark in terms of sales of cannabis. So really excited about what happened in just that year, and equally as we get, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about it, but as we get these new businesses operable, right? We expect even more of an increase in this industry here in Maryland.
Yeah, and we're going to get into questions from the audience, but I can tell you, I was just talking to a friend of mine before coming on, and Diana was asking about how do we get businesses involved. But we're going to talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about just from a historic legalization happened in July of 2023, but why is Maryland exceptional in terms of this whole social equity piece? You've seen what happened across the country in terms of the legalization of marijuana. What has been your observation of Maryland just being so intentional about inclusion?
Yeah, I think, again, if I just can say that, really the legislators and our administration, the Moore Miller administration, was really intentional about creating an office that would be solely focused on the success of social equity here in Maryland. Again, our mission is to create an equitable opportunities for supporting new cannabis entrepreneurs, also advancing restorative justice efforts and ensuring reinvestment in communities that need it most. So we do this through technical assistance, access to capital, workforce development initiatives, and policy advocacy. So all aimed to foster sort of this long-term sustainability of social equity licensees. What I've, enjoyed most in terms of building the Office of Social Equity from the ground up, and you mentioned, just me being a part of new things, has been both challenging. So I won't say that, but it's also been deeply rewarding. When I began in this role, there was essentially a blank canvas with an ambitious mandate, right? Creating the nation's most equitable cannabis market, evolving that from a legislative framework to more of a dynamic agency that's now supporting hundreds of social equity entrepreneurs. When I think about our journey, because we've been around now a year and a half, it
Mm-hmm.
really required assembling a diverse team of experts, developing policies that was really based on data and community input, and building the trust within communities, right? The same communities that were historically excluded from economic opportunities, but we want to make our approach unique, right? The state's approach is unique, and its equity isn't just about the component of our cannabis program, it's the foundation. And so our success metrics, I'm in this
I
where
see.
my lights go out. It's all right.
It's
Our
okay.
success metrics aren't just about the market growth, but about measurable economic impact in communities, again, that were most disproportionately affected by cannabis prohibition. So
Yeah. And I think that's real important. Maryland's the first state in the nation to open a cannabis licensing round exclusively for qualifying social equity applicants, as you've been talking about. But what were some of the qualifications of those applicants?
So we required, so you're right, Maryland was the first to open a social equity round purely for social equity applicants, but in all license types. So that's very important, right? For the cultivation and the growing license, as well as the processing license, and then the dispensary retailing license. And so we also, it was important to ensure that access was a part of this process. So in addition to our standard licenses, we also added a set of micro licenses. And so what that meant is, um, you know, it provided additional access for people to enter the market, you know, at a less cost, right? And also the requirements around what that meant for them and those different business types would be less. The other thing that, we did was for social equity verification, everyone had to be verified before they could apply.
Yeah,
And
can you talk a
so,
little bit about that? Because I know you had to kind of, didn't you have to live in
yeah,
the,
there were three
yeah,
criteria.
okay.
The
Yeah,
one was living in the state, and we worked with the judicial system to identify these disproportionately impacted areas. So essentially, zip codes that were excessively charged with cannabis charges. And so around the state, across the state, what was, you know, really interesting about that is that there were communities across the state. It wasn't just it included suburban areas, included rural areas. So this process has really opened up for folks across the state. The first criteria was living in one of those disproportionately impacted areas. Um,
so
you
you could,
know,
you own the business there or license there, you have to actually live in that area.
so this is just getting qualified to apply. So
Okay.
again, ensuring that this round was geared and really focused on social equity applicants. There was
Mm-hmm.
a set of criteria that was required for you to be verified to even participate in this
Gotcha.
licensing round. So one was, living in one of those disproportionately impacted areas and zip codes. The other was attending school. So if you attended public school, in one of those zip codes or areas, that qualified you to be able to apply. And then the
That's,
third criteria was based on um, a set of, HBCUs, universities, and colleges within the state of Maryland that required um, over 40% of your tuition being paid by federal Pell Grants. And so they use that. That was a way to be inclusive around the colleges and so there were six institutions, the HBCUs, as well as Washington and Venice. So if you met any of those criteria, you were then allowed to submit an application in the licensing round.
and that was the first round. That was December 2023.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And that first round, I understand that you had, of course, an abundance of applications. And how many did you have to select of those?
So the application was, we received 1,700 applications for 205 licenses. And so especially, excited about just the interest that people were in the opportunity, right? There's a very strong interest in the market. To date, we've awarded 191 of those licensees out of the 205. So that process is still happening. Um, but what's more important in, what we call success is
Mm-hmm.
that in that process, 84% of those licensed businesses are, self-identified as minority and women owned, really demonstrating this real shift toward inclusion, right? And then 53% of those were Black owned businesses have secured a license. So we're really like excited. Those numbers
Right.
really highlight the intention that was really the intention of our legislators and of the administration, really to ensure that the equitable access was there for this opportunity, and really ensuring that we have diverse entrepreneurs in the industry.
And those licenses, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, please feel free to place it in the chat, I believe. But when you look at the three areas, right? It's dispensary, it's the grower, and it's the processor, right? And so when you look at that 200, I believe you said that those licenses spread across those three categories.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
How is it weighted, kind of, sort of, you get more retail, then you get processors, how does that, I'm just assuming, so.
Well, naturally, there's
Mhm.
definitely more dispensaries, right? Retail shops where people will go in and purchase product across the state. But there are also, a number of growers and processing facilities that will be in each region of the state. And
Mhm.
so those numbers were really identified through a disparity study that the state did. Maryland is a limited licensed state. So there is a cap at some point that,
What does that mean? Oh, you're about to tell me, it's a cap,
yes.
okay.
So,
Okay.
there are other states around the country that their licensing process is rolling. It's continuous. So there could be as many license available for people to apply and really start this business in those states. Maryland is not one of those. We are limited. So there's a limited number of
Yeah,
licenses available.
but from a
Um,
business perspective, you don't want to flood the market with licenses, right? I mean, I'm just wondering.
That's a perspective, yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, we know just sort of business one-on-one, if there's, a lot of folks doing the same thing in the same space, there's a thought that that could drive down competition, or it may even drive down the cost.
Or if
Um,
there's a demand, right? You got to have the
yeah,
supply, right? So I would imagine there's a lot of demand, because as of July 1st, as you said last year, you had to tell me that I didn't know that it went to, in terms of, what did you call it, adult? What happened
it's
July 1st?
recreational adult use.
Yeah, as of July 1st. And so maybe there's a lot of demand. And so you got this
There is.
200 folks that you're dealing with. So tell me, or tell us, um, what are you trying to accomplish? I know that, and with you and I speaking, one of the things that you want to be able to do is to make sure your primary focus is to make sure that those folks are successful, and that the general public, our audience, would know that there's a need, when these um, licensees are setting up shop, and whether they're processors, growers, or dispensary, they're going to need products and services.
Mhm,
And you're providing them with an avenue by which they can make selections in terms of vendors that they may need. Is that not true?
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things. So first, I there are these 200 or so businesses that have got licensed and they're working to open their doors and become operable. They do have a time period of 18 months to make that happen, right? Um, this time recognizes sort of the real challenges of securing real estate, building out facilities, and just really navigating the local approval processes around permitting. Um, as for our office, we have sort of developed this multi-layered support system. We have a technical assistance grant program that we have given out $14,000 per eligible license. So all of those that were selected in that lottery
Mhm.
received some dollars, a grant to really go toward educational and technical services. It was important to us to really expand that, right? We know that as we looked at the business readiness of these 200 businesses, it really ranged from, folks that saw this as an opportunity, but may have never owned a business before, don't know a whole lot about cannabis. And so then on the other end of that spectrum, you have businesses that, they may have been a part of the ownership team, or they may have worked in every single um, license type, right? So they come with some experience and skill. We opened up that technical assistance grant, which was it was $2 million that we ended up providing to these licensees to really not only think about education and training if that's what you needed, but extending it to legal support, real estate advisory. We know that's important, business consulting. So people were really able to kind of use these as some, startup funds to kind of address some immediate needs. The other way we're supporting them is really around, a few different programs. One is a Trailblazer series where we're really connecting our Maryland entrepreneurs with successful social equity operators across the country. And that's
Mhm.
something that we launched last month. I'm a big believer of, you know, there's the technical piece of learning the business, following the steps, getting all your ducks in order. But we know entrepreneurship is a very lonely place. We
Mhm.
know at different times you may be discouraged, might see, that how am I really going to make this happen, right? My lights are going off again. So it was important through this Trailblazer series to put people in front of them that started off just as they are, right? Very little capital, very little, some that had to learn the business as they went along. And so that is really bringing folks in front of them to kind of give them that inspiration and that encouragement. But also, share the stuff you won't get in a classroom, right?
True.
Share the things
True.
you're not going to get on in some books or talking like what are those tips? What were some of the strategies that they tried, they had to navigate to really make it happen. We also plan to working with you and CRMSDC, we know there's a need for a masterclass program. So what are those topics in
Mhm.
business of owning a cannabis business and really bringing executive level business education directly to these business entrepreneurs? Like anybody else, they got a job, they're starting a business, so they're very busy. So we're trying to really just approach this in a multi-layer way, so people can kind of tap in where it makes sense for them. Beyond our resources, this, partnership with organizations like yourself to kind of continue to create the networking, the mentorship, the business development opportunities, to really tailor that unique need that they need. As far as I'm really excited, I've
Mhm.
been in the supplier diversity space a really long time. And so as we think about their 200 businesses that are preparing to open their doors, they need products and services.
Mhm.
And so our office is really thinking about, you know, connecting them and giving them that opportunity, right? We need to put the security services in front of them, the real estate construction services in front of them, the professional services. Marketing and branding is a big deal, right? And
Sure.
so we want to help them as much as we can by providing and giving them those. So we're thinking about some vendor fairs just for them, so they can have and get access to those Maryland businesses that can provide those products and services.
So it sounds like you really want them to be successful because it just sounds like some fantastic wraparound services that you've provided. I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you a couple of questions. One, I needed to make a comment because part of our relationship is around some of the services that we provide and the businesses that we support that can provide some of those things. But we're also program focused, and one of our programs is the Capital Readiness Program that is actually headed by Sonia Bigelow Smith and her team and Amanda Beal. And part of it is making sure that our business, not just the businesses that fall under where you are, but just making sure businesses are ready for
Mhm.
the capital they need to run their business. Undercapitalization of businesses is one of the most prolific concerns and challenges businesses have, in terms of being successful, being undercapitalized. But you don't want to go and get capital when you need it. And so you need to be prepared for that. So kudos for thinking that kind of through, those things through. And in terms of capitalization of these kind of business, what kind of capital is needed, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. It's really dependent on that licensing type, right?
Hmm.
Capital, like, this, you work with different businesses in different spaces, and capital is always a problem,
Hmm.
a challenge, I'll say.
Hmm.
And we don't always have access to it. And so anywhere from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars is what these businesses need to raise
Mhm.
to just open their doors. And so, there's work that we're also doing and creating to actually provide and help them in that space. We mentioned that, our cannabis market exceeded $1 billion
Mhm.
the first year sales,
Mhm.
creating opportunities across just the plant touching and the ancillary businesses. Our social equity licenses bring unique market insights and sort of this authentic community connections that we translate into business advantage. So when we think about how can we help to bridge the gap around the investment in the capital piece, we want to where we have some things in place that we're kind of finalizing, but we're looking to really provide direct investment around with the regulatory parameters. I won't say, the way that our policies and laws are written, there are restrictions around what that looks like. But capital intensive aspects around real estate and equipment, where traditional financing kind of remains limited, we want to sort of provide some of the specialized services that are tailored to cannabis operations. So we
Yeah.
have, a program where we're also, we understand the importance of mentorship in this process. The state has a process. Our office will be launching our social equity partnership program, and it's really connecting the existing operators within the state to
Mhm.
mentor these social equity licenses. And there's funding for that, right? And so we know that, and that can be done in different ways. It could purchase equipment, there could be space that could be rented. And it also could be business development, right? Really helping them around the business development and understanding how to set things up and get things going. So
Okay.
capital is something we have been thinking about since day one.
Yeah.
So it's something that definitely is priority for us.
One thing I want to talk about, because it was an interesting conversation you and I had, but then I want to open it up for take some of the questions as well, and we'll come
Okay.
back to some of mine. But you and I had this conversation about um, righting some wrongs, right, relative to the cannabis industry prior to legalization, right? And so there is some talent from a workforce development standpoint that may be there that may be worth kind of partnering up.
Mhm,
Simply said, drug dealers have been doing this for years. And how
mhm,
do we do a skills transfer of
mhm,
folks that knew how to do this successfully? Um, and how do you recruit those skills? Which is something I think is interesting to look at.
mhm. No, I mean, I think when we talk about, and of course, our priority was really set around the licensing, entrepreneurship, owning a business, building a business. But there are a few other areas that are equally important in this space that is really going to lend to the success. And one is, how do we right the wrongs? And so, really happy, I'm sure you've heard about it, is the governor's governor granting last year, right before the year anniversary of legalization for adult use, granting 175,000 pardons for cannabis related offenses. And that's really the highest number in history that really affirms our state's commitment to justice and repair. One of the things he, and I try to repeat it as much as I can is, we can't get excited and talk about legalization without dealing with the criminalization. And so
Hmm.
how do we address that piece? Also, this year, the governor has an expungement reform act, which expands record clearance pathways. So really removing barriers for individuals with past cannabis conviction. We also have, our partners at the Maryland Cannabis Administration currently to, have a workforce development program that they've launched. And so they've been working and working to get people skilled up to work in this industry. Our office, we're currently, talking with our colleges and universities. We want to create, this is a real industry. And one of the things that, is priority for me. Yes, there's social equity. It was a way for entry into it, but we need to also equally work to ensure that they become a fabric within our business community, right? $1.1 billion is $1.1 billion.
That's
And
correct.
so it's very, very, very important that we create ways for people to work in this space, that we create career pathways. So what are the careers in cannabis, right? And
Hmm.
so we're working to establish that here in Maryland. So yes, there's the licensing, owning a business, but we also want to make sure the workforce is developed. We also want to
Hmm.
make sure that there's career pathways within our institutions to really help sustain Maryland's market.
And I think this is a great break. And thank you for saying that. I think that is so very, very important. And so Sonia, how are we going to do this? Let's open up for a couple of questions.
Absolutely, Sharon and Audrey, thank you so much for great discussion so far. You've got quite a few questions in the chat. So I'll start with one that I'm seeing actually quite often and frequently. It says, when will the next round for social equity applicants open?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question.
That is the question that hits our inbox, I will say at least 10 to 15 times a week. So, and it's a valid, people are waiting. And, if you remember me telling you, 1,700 applications came in for 205 licenses. So we know that there's a group of folks waiting. That has not been determined yet. We have truly been focused on the 205. The clock has started ticking for the 18 months for them to become operable. That round is coming, but we have not set a date on when that will be. And people will know. That will be something that everyone will know and be communicated wide and far.
Great. Thank you for that response. And we'll make sure that as an organization, we communicate that out to our network as well. Wendy had a question and asked, is it considered a controlled substance and thus needing an additional license to transport?
So yes, so I talked a little bit about our intent and how access and inclusion was very important. Um, one of those micro licenses, right? So there's a micro cultivation license, there's a micro processing license, and then there's a micro, I guess it's called dispensary or retail. It's not, it's delivery. So it's essentially a delivery. So right now we've added that additional license, and some of those that out of that 200 that are working to become operable have that delivery license.
Very good. The next question Melvin asked Audrey around, is this opportunity really for Maryland residents only, or has it expanded into the DMV as a region?
Good
And are
question.
you collaborating with any other regions to talk about this initiative?
Our intent and focus is around Maryland's economic growth and opportunity. I love DC. I used to live there, but I am focused on Maryland.
Great. Thank you. I have a few others, and then Sharon, I'll see if you had any more you wanted to ask. Rahul asked, after an applicant passes their final inspection, what is the estimated time until the license is granted?
So that's an interesting question. Those that were selected immediately started the process, and there was a 6-month supplemental application. So there are some things that they needed to accomplish and show, whether it was capital raising at a 6-month period, and then you continue on in the process. For if the person asking the question has a license, a conditional license, I really encourage you to reach out to your investigator. I think there's different investigators, they work differently, but you should definitely reach out to your investigator. And again, you have our email address. If there's some challenges or just some things that we can be helpful with, you could definitely reach out to us as well.
Great.
that
And
will help.
we'll be putting that information in the chat on how you all can reach out to the office. Bernard had a really good question around how do we connect as business owners with current license holders to market our ancillary products and services?
Email us. I just said we're going to be doing these vendor fairs. If you are interested in working with cannabis businesses, you have a product, you have a service that they need, and they need all the stuff, just like anyone else, right? Connect with us because we will be, and I think there'll be information shared about that as well before we disconnect. So great question. If you're out there, yes, we want you all to connect with us because I would definitely want to ensure that we bring, Maryland's finest to these new entrepreneurs and business owners.
Right. You talked, Audrey, about we're talking about the social equity, we're talking about the 200, but how many other licenses have been granted other than this through this office?
So this office has only been existent, Office of Social Equity. So this has been our focus and our only round that we've participated. Prior to legalization of adult use, I believe there was 171 businesses, or maybe 150 something, that were already in the market before the legalization of adult use.
Okay. I was just wondering about that part.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how to, what part of your vision of the vision of the office is to make sure that when we talk about these businesses, we're talking about the fabric of business, because there's this stigma of it being a cannabis business. And at the end of the day, it's an emerging market and it is a business. And so it looks like what your hope is that it would be taken into consideration that it is a business.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, we get it. We understand that, the history of how our communities have experienced cannabis, and I'm talking about the criminalization of it. And I think a lot of that work in terms of education around the plant, the medicinal pieces of it being legal, there's research, it's used in that way that I think even our community haven't really taken advantage of. And I think there's opportunity there. I think in our efforts to, support these businesses, it's a responsibility to bring our communities along. When I really started to think about this work, I often think about, I started at Hopkins in 2020, like 10 days before COVID became this like crisis. And so, really looking and hearing and seeing and actually experiencing it myself, right? The need for a vaccination, right? That would, our community was a little hesitant about that, rightfully so, right? Because there was this historic past associated with our community and vaccinations, especially coming from the government. And so I kind of see it the same way, right? I see that there's an experience that our communities have had. We need to address that, delicately. We need to educate on the plant, the medicinal benefits, talk about the public health aspects of it. And then again, like we said, you started off with your question, these are businesses. Again, I'll repeat, $1 billion is $1 billion. And so that's real money, and and those, businesses within our community. So there's work that we have to do on all angles around this work to ensure that the success of it is sustained.
Okay. Sonia, any more questions before I ask my last few?
Yes, we do have a few. I'll make a comment. Danielle says she's a member of CRMSDC with Brewington Management Company, and she is a social equity cultivation licensee working towards opening. And she just wanted to thank you both for having this conversation. So I just wanted to shout that out.
And we want to thank her for being in the number.
Yes. Hi, Danielle.
And tell us what are you doing? You growing, you manufacture, what are you doing? Tell us what you're doing.
We'll ask her to type in the chat. And I do have one question, Sharon, that's came up quite a bit. Jane asked about the social equity grant for $100,000. Audrey, any new details on any grants that are available?
Yes, so I mentioned the Social Equity Partnership Grant that will be rolling out. I'll say it, I'm gonna put us on the hook, 30, 60 days. You all will be getting information about that. And that is, money, it will be based on license type, but they are, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. The Social Equity Partnership Grant is the grant that is the mentor-mentee partnership with existing operators. So yes, that will be rolling out too in 30, 60 days. The Cannabis Assistance Fund ran by the Department of Commerce. We are working with them. There is a round of funding coming out that is going to support those businesses that have successfully, gotten a license and passed their 6 month. We realize that, some of that process is still happening. So we're kind of working through those last bits and tips, but that funding is coming. Yes.
You want to do one more, Sonia? Are you good?
Yes, I just wanted to comment. Danielle did respond and said she's a grower in Central Maryland and a top 100 MBE, Sharon.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's right,
Okay.
she is. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I do want to comment, Sharon, before I turn it back over to you to close it out. We've got several professionals, business owners, electrical contractors, people that are interested in the consumption and infused food, CPAs on the line. So a host of different professional services that are interested in staying in touch and learning how they can do business with these new licensees. So I just wanted to make that comment, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Sonia. Sonia's going to come back on as soon as we kind of wrap up this conversation. I know that we talked about benchmark, and so glad to be a resident of the state of Maryland. Love that Maryland is still the most progressive state in the country relative to looking at the protection of minority businesses. And so glad to be in that number and glad to be personally a part of that history. But when you look at benchmarks against other we're limited license, but you have like a New York model, for example. Talk a little bit about that. And I know that you're doing things preventatively, right? And that's why you're doing the wraparound services. But why do cannabis businesses fail? It doesn't seem like there's a lack of demand. Why do they fail?
Yeah, so for different reasons. I think that one is, we talked about capital. We talked about capital. We also talk about the business readiness. This is a complicated, regulated business. So it's not, you're not opening a bakery, you're not opening an event planning company, right? You really have to know the state laws and policies and operate within those. So stay very compliant. And, when you think about the cost, there's cost to that when you're not. And so, when you also think about the cost of application, the cost of your license, there's different reasons of why, some of these businesses fail. One of the things is, cannabis or marijuana is still prohibited at the federal level. So, where you think about banking and having a relationship and establishing a relationship with a bank, these businesses have a challenge in doing that, right? Your Bank of America, your Wells Fargo are not doing business with our cannabis businesses. And so they're having to find local banks. There's also, it's a very heavy cash driven business because of the federal restrictions around that. So there's these different challenges that you wouldn't have with starting, a business that did not have that wasn't a controlled substance. And so you have to kind of think about those different things that kind of add on. And those that have been able to be very successful, they had the funding available, right? They had investors waiting, and And so that's a big piece, but also just knowing the business and keeping up with sort of the evolution. This is we talk about 1 billion here. There's other states that, it's still very new market. It's still a new business and market happening. And so you have to keep up with what's happening in the industry as well.
Yeah, and I would imagine, because it is a unique um, product, all right? It's what you're doing is unique, but what does not change are basic business fundamentals. And so whether you're selling marijuana or you're selling edibles or you're selling infused beverages, whatever that is, or you're manufacturing, growing, if you aren't an astute entrepreneur, you're going to still have the issues. Now, listen, I'm asking for a friend, not for myself, but I understand that there might be a bill to include edibles and infused beverages. I'm not asking for myself.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Well, you tell your friend that there is a bill in session right now for on-site consumption.
What does that mean? Tell folks what that means.
So it's, there are events that happen, and just like traditionally you probably can get an alcoholic beverage at an event. This bill will allow for consumption of edibles or drinks. And so it's something that is
I'm
in.
at I'm at a concert. I'm gonna, those kind of things. Okay.
Yeah, and it's happening. Like these things are happening in,
Mhm.
across the country. This is the kind of the wave of it. I think one of the challenges, I'll talk a little bit about here in Maryland, right? We've gotten rid of, it's legal, but there's restrictions about where you can consume. And so this on-site consumption bill is again geared towards social equity licenses. So they kind of get first dibs of getting these licenses. But also it's sort of the culture. It's when you're going out, you're at a festival, people want, so we're just, the bill is meant to kind of open up those spaces. And again, when I talked about this industry being, evolving over time, you're going to continue to have these things that sort of normalize the consumption of cannabis. And we're here for it. It's challenging, but I think over time we'll normalize it, and things like on some site consumption will happen.
Yeah, I am so happy that you are the executive in charge of this movement, of this inaugural piece on the ground floor to make it happen. Because what we know about emerging technologies and market is that, and we've always not been at the table. But when those companies that are at the table, as that industry grows, so do those businesses. And so to have this be intentional is just tremendous. I also want to thank you so much, Audrey, for sharing your knowledge and time, your wisdom, and for your dedication and sacrifice to do what you're doing. And so this doesn't just end today, ladies and gentlemen. What we're going to talk about, we're resurrecting our Hot Chat podcast, but we're also going to resurrect one of the programs of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council, and that was our Get on the Bus. We did the Get on the Plane, Get on the Bus, and our Get on the Bus is going to be a Get on the Bus cannabis tour, where we will tour manufacturer, we will tour dispensary, we will tour, what am I missing? Dispensary,
Cultivation.
cultivation, and there are no freebies, there are no giveaways, just the exchange of information to get to more ingrain you in this process so that you can make a sound decision if this is an industry that you'd be interested in, or more importantly, if you can provide that service or product to those 200 and as we move forward. Audrey, thank you so much. Thank you for helping us launch our new series. And we're going to, in the coming weeks, we're going to be examining other emerging markets and technology, including AI, the Internet of Things, cybersecurity, and others. So stay tuned to CRMSDC, our website, so that you could be a part of it. Anything else you want to wrap Sonia, are you kicking me off at this point?
No, I'm not. Thank you both for the conversation.
Mhm.
And thank you, Audrey, but nothing else that we have to cover at this moment.
Okay. All right. And so what are we doing now? Are you coming on to do anything, Sonia? You said if I would just read the run of show, I would know what's going on, right?
Can I say something really
You
quick?
absolutely can.
So just as a last point, our cannabis industry is more than just a business. It's really about the righting the past of the wrongs, that generation wealth that we're building,
Mm,
really just creating opportunities for communities that have been left behind. So if you're an entrepreneur, an investor, an advocate, there's a place for you in this space. Let's continue to work together. We need each other, build an industry that's definitely equitable, but also sustainable. So we're just really excited about the progress and what we have planned for 2025. I also want to make sure that y'all sign up. My Sarita will kill me, our comms person, is our Bud Bulletin, which is our newsletter. So we'll be sharing lots of information. So all of that should be in the chat for you all.
right.
But really look forward to connecting and staying connected, Sharon. And I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. You know, this is a match made in heaven. So Audrey Johnson, Maryland Executive Director of the Office of Social Equity. We again hope that you have gained some knowledge. And if you'd like to connect with Audrey's office to learn more about the opportunity, follow her on LinkedIn. She is on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
or visit their website at www.ose.maryland.gov. Again, that's www.ose.maryland.gov. And lastly, we hope you enjoyed this conversation, learn what we do more as an organization, and further and upcoming events to further engage us, grow your business, and how cannabis could potentially result in business opportunity investment for you. And if you'd like to connect with my office, please visit us on our website at www.CRMSDC, or just holla at me on LinkedIn or any of our social media channels. This will be on YouTube. And thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon. And until next time, just remember, we are here advocating for you during this particular time. It's kind of hard, but trust and believe that we are advocating for the survivability of our businesses. So just believe CRMSDC, Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council, the Capital Readiness Program, the Minority Business Development Agency, which is under our umbrella, our mission endures even after 53 years. Thank you and have a wonderful remainder of your day or evening.